Emma, tired after the long journey, tossed her keys onto the table and looked around the house she had inherited from her aunt, who had passed away several months ago. The house was old, neglected, but charming in its own way. 2 stories tall, with large windows that overlooked the forest. Her aunt had lived here for many years in solitude, and although they rarely saw each other, Emma knew that her aunt was somewhat strange. In her last letters, she had written about something being wrong with the house, but Emma dismissed it as the whims of an elderly woman. For the first few days, Emma enjoyed the peace and quiet. Her old life seemed far away. The noisy city, the endless work stress, the constant pressure. Here in this forgotten corner of the world, she could finally relax and be alone with her thoughts. During the day, sunlight flooded the house, and the forest around it seemed calm, even welcoming. But at night, everything changed. As dusk fell, the silence became unsettling. The forest, which by day felt alive and vibrant, turned into something ominous in the dark. The branches of the trees scratched at the windows like claws, and Emma began to notice strange sounds, faint, barely perceptible, as if someone or something was walking around the house. A few days after moving in, Emma felt truly uncomfortable for the first time. It was late in the evening, and she was about to go to bed when she heard the first knock on the window. At first, she thought it was just the wind or some random noise, but soon the sound repeated. A faint scraping, as if something was dragging claws across the glass. Outside, there was only darkness. No signs of life, just trees and thick gloom that seemed to swallow all light. Emma stood frozen for several minutes, staring into the night, before finally stepping back and convincing herself it was just her imagination. She returned to bed, but her sleep was restless. The next morning, Emma decided to distract herself from her troubling thoughts by going to the local shop in the nearby village. The small, quiet settlement seemed friendly. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, smiled when she saw the new resident. "You're staying in old Mrs. Wilkins' house, aren't you?" she asked. Emma nodded as she gathered her groceries. But the woman's smile quickly faded, and her expression became serious. "I've heard there's something not right with that house," she whispered. "People say strange things happen there. I wouldn't advise staying there alone at night." Emma laughed nervously, unsure of how to respond, but the woman's words stuck with her. They circled in her mind all day as she drove home along the narrow road flanked by forest. That evening, still shaken by the conversation in the shop, Emma decided to invite her friends to stay over for the weekend. She texted Mike and Sarah, her close friends whom she hadn't seen in a while. Mike and Sarah agreed, and 2 days later, they arrived at the old house. Emma felt a sense of relief that she was no longer alone in this desolate, strange place. The reunion was warm and cheerful as always. "This house looks like the perfect setting for a horror movie," Mike joked, eyeing the large windows and worn walls. "If anything, I'll be the first one to run." Sarah laughed, but it seemed something about the house unsettled her too. They made dinner, drank some wine, and enjoyed the evening. All the tension seemed to melt away. Emma almost stopped thinking about the strange noises and visions that had haunted her. But as the night once again enveloped the house, the fear returned. Late at night, Emma was awakened by the familiar knock. It was the same sound as before, quiet, insistent, the scraping on the glass. She froze, standing in the middle of the living room, too afraid to approach the window. At that moment, She heard a rustling sound just outside the glass, and her breath caught in her throat. She knew someone was out there. Unable to take it any longer, Emma yanked the curtains aside. A man was standing there. His face was distorted, hidden by shadow, but he was right outside the window, staring at her. His face had no eyes, only dark, endless voids. Emma screamed and jumped back, closing the curtains. Her heart pounded wildly, and she couldn't believe what she had just seen. This wasn't a dream, wasn't her imagination. He was there. In the morning, Emma tried to tell her friends what had happened, but they brushed it off. Mike smirked, and Sarah tried to comfort her, saying it was probably just a dream. "You're just tired, Em," Mike said, sipping his coffee. "It's an old house. It makes a lot of weird noises. Maybe you just imagined it." Emma shook her head. She knew it wasn't a dream. He had been at the window. She tried to forget about it, but by evening the fear began to rise in her chest again. As night fell, every creak, every rustle made her more tense. This time, Emma couldn't sleep. She listened to every sound, her body tensing with each small creak of the house. And again, near midnight, the scraping began. But this time it was louder, closer. Emma jumped out of bed and headed for the window. "Sarah! Mike!" Emma shouted, but no one answered. The figure didn't move. It just stood there staring at her with its empty eyes. Panicking, Emma ran from the room, banging on her friends' doors. But by the time Mike and Sarah came out of their rooms, the figure was gone. Emma pointed to the window, but there was nothing there. The forest outside was calm, the night eerily silent. "There's no one here, Emma," Mike said irritably, clearly tired of her fears. Sarah hugged her, trying to soothe her. "You're not alone. If something happens, we're here," she said. But Emma knew no one believed her. Each night, the entity came closer. Emma saw it at every window, felt its presence as she sat in the dark. It seemed to mock her, appearing and disappearing, leaving no trace. On the last night when Emma heard the scraping again, she didn't run to the window. She couldn't bring herself to look. But the footsteps, they weren't outside anymore. The footsteps echoed down the hallway, coming closer to her door. And as the door slowly creaked open, Emma realized it wasn't outside anymore. It was inside.